Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia. Natural selection can be discussed as a single force when discussing the theory of evolution. However, it is not just one concept. For example, it can be categorized depending on what trait values are selected for or against, and thus the outcome of the selection acting upon a population. Today, we're going to be discussing three types of selection: directional, disruptive, and stabilising selection, which vary depending on which phenotypic values have a higher chance of survival in the environment the organisms reside in. First up, directional selection, also known as positive selection. This form of selection results in either extreme for trait values being selected for, as one extreme gives a selective advantage for the organism in question over other values, and the average moving in either direction as a result. Allele frequencies shift in a particular direction, with particular alleles either heading towards being fixed in a population or decreasing in frequency. This form of selection frequently occurs due to the natural environment the organisms live in altering. An example of directional selection would be the case of the peppered moth, which we discussed back in episode 25. As another example, after a drought in the Galapagos archipelago in 1977, the beaks of the seed-eating medium ground finches became larger. This is because the majority of the seeds that were left over after the dry period were tough and difficult to open, hence favouring larger beaks. To restate this in the context of directional selection, larger beaks were at a selective advantage, meaning the average beak size of the population increased. Directional selection is also frequent in artificial selection, such as in the case of cows being bred for greater milk production. Next, there's disruptive selection, which involves average values for a trait being at a selective disadvantage. The end result is that both extremes are selected for, increasing the variability of the trait. This type of selection occurs when a variable has separate or extreme outcomes, for example, the environment being very cold or very warm. The allele frequency change in the population means that allele frequencies of different subgroups within the population are different from each other, and different alleles move to fixation in each. Further down the line in evolutionary terms, this will create a pair of different extreme values in terms of phenotype. Disruptive selection may therefore allow sympatric speciation to take place, which we previously discussed back in episode 29. As an example of disruptive selection, a group of black-bellied seed cracker finches living in Cameroon have diverged to take advantage of both available food sources, which have either hard or soft seeds. Large or small beaks are best suited to each respective seed type. Conversely, medium-sized beaks are less able to crack both seed types, leading to the probability of survival being higher for birds if they are further from a medium beak size, and meaning medium-beaked birds have less chance of surviving and reproducing. Therefore, natural selection means that trait values at either end of the spectrum benefit, as we've discussed already. Disruptive selection contrasts with balancing selection, which we'll probably talk about in another episode. Finally, let's turn to stabilising selection, which is also called normalising selection or maintenance evolution. This is the exact opposite of disruptive selection in that medium values are at an evolutionary advantage, and those at either end are at a disadvantage. Natural selection might follow this scenario if the environment does not change much over space or time. This form of selection reduces the variability of the characteristic in question, and means that a species doesn't change much with regard to the trait under selection down the generations, stymieing the creation of novelty by natural selection. The fact that taxonomic groups in the fossil record have stayed largely the same for extended periods of geological time has been ascribed to this form of selection. So, an example of stabilising selection? Well, from a historical point of view, the mass of human babies would fit the description. Babies which were between 3 to 4 kilograms when they were born had better odds of survival. Conversely, babies which were more or less than the average value of 3.6 kilograms were previously more likely to die, although medical progress has largely counteracted this. That's it for this week. As always, thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episode topics, feel free to get in touch at the show's email address. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.